Have you ever wondered how dangerous special operations are in real life? We see them in movies, the seemingly invincible heroes of special operations, effortlessly neutralizing threats and saving the day. But the reality of their world is far grittier, far more perilous, and infinitely more demanding than any Hollywood script. Greetings, team. This is Christopher Littlestone of lifeasaspecialoperation.com. And in today's video, we're going to discuss how dangerous are special operations. Really, we will do so by discussing dangerous training, fatality statistics over the past 20 years, and the risks associated with capture and interrogation. Special Operations Forces undertake some of the most dangerous training and missions imaginable. This video explores the multifaceted dangers faced by special operators. And I'm going to warn you, I did a lot of research to find some statistics for you. I hope I don't overwhelm you with numbers. Let's jump in with training dangers. The path to becoming a special operator is fraught with danger. Training pipelines are designed to push candidates to their absolute limits, preparing them for the extreme conditions that they'll face in the battlefield. This includes high-risk activities like parachute jumps, combat diving, and live fire exercises. Accidents during training are not uncommon. A report by the U.S. Government Accountability Office, or GAO, found that the special operations community had 2,880 training accidents over a 10-year period. That makes 288 training accidents a year. 40% of these are associated with parachuting and diving. That same report cites 67,500 members of SOF. So if we have 288 injuries a year for 67,500 members of SOF, then the training injury percentage each year is 0.42%. That's less than half of 1%. Actually, looking back on all the stupid and extremely dangerous things that we did during training, that number seems pretty low. Nonetheless, 288 accidents a year is too many. Let's move on to statistics in a war zone. But before we do so, let me tell you that detailed casualty figures are almost always classified. And this is to protect ongoing operations, methods, and sources. Due to the sensitive nature of SOF operations, precise, real-time public casualty figures for all SOF across all post-9/11 conflicts are generally not aggregated and released in the same way as overall military casualties. A DoD source reported that in Afghanistan and Iraq alone, the U.S. had 7,036 deaths. Brown University reported a slightly larger number because it includes wars in Syria and Africa. Their number is 7,053 U.S. service members died in the post-9/11 wars. Of those, 2,324 were in Afghanistan, 4,599 in Iraq, and 130 others in wars in Syria and Africa. One scholarly article reports that in the first 18 years after 9/11, U.S. SOCOM had 614 fatalities. If we look at the total number of deaths in post-9/11 wars being 7,053, and for 18 years of those wars, SOCOM reported 614 fatalities, we see that SOF fatalities likely make up 8.7%. Of those U.S. SOCOM fatalities, 67.6% occurred in the Army, of which 49.2% occurred in the Special Forces Command, 16% by NAVSPEC War, 9.3% by AFSOC, and 7.2% by MARSOC. So by percentage, U.S. Special Forces had the most dangerous and fatality-producing missions in SOCOM. But with that said, a Navy postgraduate study used data collected from restricted SEAL personnel records, the Defense Manpower Data Center, and Social Security Administration to identify and profile all U.S. active duty enlisted Navy Special Warfare operators having served in Iraq and Afghanistan from 2007 to 12. During those 5 years, SEAL operators sustained a fatality rate in Iraq and Afghanistan that was nearly 9 times greater than that of the overall U.S. military. So to add emphasis, SEAL fatalities were 9 times greater than the overall US military statistic, and yet they only accounted for 16% of total US SOCOM fatalities. Of the 614 SOCOM fatalities, 60%, or 369, were caused by battle injuries from the enemy, otherwise known as killed in action or KIA. By subcommand, the primary cause of death for fatalities with non-survivable injuries were blasts for RSOF, multiple blunt force for NAVSPEC War, gunshot wounds for AFSOC, and a split between blast and gunshot wounds for MARSOC. Another article also analyzed the statistics of the first 18 years of SOCOM fatalities after 9/11. Of the 369 SOCOM deaths, with a median age of 29 years old, and only 5 of these deaths were women, the major cause of death were blast injuries with 45% and gunshot wounds at 39%. Another article reported that more than half of SOCOM fatalities occurred during mounted operations, and of these mounted operations, 53% were in ground vehicles, 37% in rotary wing, and 9% in fixed-wing aircraft. An Army Times article reported that in 2018, in Afghanistan, there were only 13 US deaths, yet 69%, or 9 of those deaths, were from SOF units, and 23%, or 3, were killed by insider attacks. Beyond the risk of death, special operators face a high probability of sustaining wounds in action, or being WIA. While killed in action data is hard to find, wounded in action data is even more difficult to look up. A person dies and is buried. This is a fact and usually publicized in a local newspaper. But if an operator gets shot by a terrorist, maybe he's able to heal up and get back into the action a few days or a few weeks later. Nonetheless, the US government has published some overall data on wounded in action numbers over the past decades. One article reports that the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan resulted in 53,000 wounded in action. 7 injury profiles were identified and defined as open wounds 18%, type 1 traumatic brain injury and facial injuries 14%, disseminated injuries 6%, type 2 traumatic brain injury 15%, lower extremity injuries 19.8%, burns 7%, and chest or abdominal injuries at 17%. A congressional report from 2020 said that the wounded in action ratio for the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan were 10-1 enlisted versus officers. An analysis of Ranger Regiment reports that in the first 20 years post 9/11, the Rangers had 813 injuries and only 62 fatalities. This data reports that for every Ranger that was killed in action, 13 were wounded. I know this is bad statistical analysis, but if you use that same number of 13 WIA to each KIA, and then apply it to the 614 KIAs associated with US SOCOM, then you could say that we plus or minus had 7,982 wounded in action, and that would account for about 15% of the entire military WIA rate. As I said, this is a huge guess, only after hours of research. Disappointingly, I was never able to find a statistic that accurately depicted the SOCOM WIA rate and how that was as a percentage of the overall force. The best I could do was to find a vague defense.gov report from 2021 that stated, quote, "Although U.S. Special Operations Command makes up just 3% of the joint force, it has suffered over half of all combat casualties over the past few years. I think the key takeaway here is that SOF is dangerous. Worse than being killed or wounded is being captured, and the covert nature of many special operations missions means that operators face a unique risk of capture. If captured, they may be subjected to brutal interrogations. The potential for mistreatment and the strategic information they possess make them high-value targets for enemy forces. The Defense POW MIA Accounting Agency does not have a tab for Afghanistan or Iraq, so I'm led to believe that we don't have any POWs or MIAs from the past 25 years. And this is partially because all POWs were murdered by the Taliban and ISIS. If I'm wrong or anyone has some data about MIAs for the past 2 decades, then please put some hyperlinks in the comments. I know that when I was working in South America, one of the local drug cartels placed a bounty of $10,000 for any Green Beret, dead or alive. I can only imagine that other terrorist groups would gladly pay more. I think the takeaway is that because SOF work in small groups, they frequently work in non-permissive environments, and because they often work behind enemy lines, the chances of them becoming a POW or MIA is significantly higher than their conventional military colleagues. This is why special operators are required to attend Survival, Evasion, Resistance, and Escape, or SEER school, as part of their training pipelines. Despite inherent dangers, dedicated and brave men must undertake special operations in order to maintain global security. These courageous individuals willingly face extraordinary risks. Their sacrifices, often unseen and unacknowledged, are a testament to their commitment to protecting the world from harm. Is it dangerous? Yes. Would I go back and do it again? Absolutely. If you're interested in learning more about special operations or preparing for a career in the military or special operations community, then I invite you to learn more about the resources available to you at my website, lifeisaspecialoperation.com. Thanks for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe if you want to join our Life is a Special Operation team. And don't forget to forward this video to a friend or family member who needs to see it. Life is a Special Operation. Are you ready for it?